Well, are you baseball fans ready for the last week of the season?
Big week for some of us, a big weekend.
Thank you, Judge.
Well, I'm a Dodger fan and we've had a great season and we're still not going to finish first.
No, you need to spend more money.
They've got it.
Yes, and they're spending it. Jeff, who did the Sox play?
Washington.
Oh,
So they're killing me. On
Oh.
the other hand, they have over-delivered. So
Yeah.
I'm thankful for that. This was supposed to be a lost season.
well, it still may be.
Judge, who's your team?
I'm a Yankee fan.
Anyone who beats the Yankees is a friend of mine.
Well,
Well said. Hear, hear.
there's a lot of those out there. I appreciate that. There's almost as many
A lot
of
of
you as
friends.
there are of us. I always thought about that when I followed football. I was an ABC fan, anybody but the Cowboys.
Hmm. Can I join that club?
Yeah, I don't care anymore, so. All right, what am I doing?
So it's cold and rainy today up in Santa Fe, where Celia and I are. What's it like down in Cruces and Carlsbad?
It's a
Well,
little
it's-
overcast, but the sun keeps coming through here.
It's going to be 80, 85 today. We didn't get the rain we expected yesterday.
We got it.
We got a bunch.
Yeah, I haven't seen the mountain yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if we have snow up on the top there this morning.
Stuart, I went on a hike. Some friends of mine from high school were in town. So last month, my friend who lives on Cerro Gordo, we started down on Old Santa Fe Trail and just walked up the river, up Alameda, I'm sorry, up the river all the way up to his house. That is a spectacular walk.
You know, that's where I walk my dog every morning. We spend about
Lots
an
of people
hour
do.
just right along that Santa Fe River Trail.
Yeah. We
Yeah, it's
walked up,
beautiful.
had lunch at his house and walked back down. You know, it was about 6 miles, I think.
Yeah, I'm
But
glad you did that.
God, it was wonderful. It was
Yep.
just great.
You didn't see any bears, did you?
Actually, his camera in his backyard, which backs up to the river, showed that at about 5:30 that morning, he'd had a visitor to his crabapple tree, which was pretty substantial sized bear.
Wow.
Yeah, we've had them around here. We see the
Mhm.
droppings regularly on our property and on that hike that you just described.
Yeah, that's what alerted him to it, was some pretty fresh scat. And then he looked at the camera and went, whoa.
All right, Judge, it's 9 o'clock, or I should now say Chair. It's 9 o'clock and everybody's here.
All right. Thank you very much. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. And as per the script, Commissioner Baker, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Mr. Bluestone,
Here,
Commissioner Carruthers,
Here,
Commissioner Castillo. Celia, are you here?
The mute.
now we can hear you.
Okay, yes,
There
they
we
wouldn't
go.
let me unmute. Yes, I am here.
All
Good
right.
morning, everyone.
Good morning. Commissioner Solomon,
You're muted too, Ron.
but if you raise your hand, I'll count you as here.
He may not be, there he is.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, present.
Hey, it's morning, Ron.
Morning.
And Commissioner Villanueva.
Here.
Thank you, everyone. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Second.
Thank you. As per usual, the roll call, Commissioner Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Bluestone,
Yes.
Commissioner Carruthers,
yes,
Commissioner Castillo,
Yes.
Commissioner Solomon,
Yes.
Commissioner Villanueva.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting, which was August 31st, or I'm sorry, August 13th, 2021. Motion and a second.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Motion and a second. Commissioner Baker,
Yes.
Commissioner Bluestone,
Yes.
Commissioner Carruthers,
Yes,
Commissioner Castillo,
Yes.
Commissioner Solomon,
Yes.
Commissioner Villanueva.
Yes.
All right, thank you. And now I'll turn it over to Jeremy. Item number 1 is the fiscal year 23 budget request and strategic plan.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Morning, Commissioners. Just before I begin, I just want to make sure that everyone has the meeting materials, and if you don't, please let us know now. So one of the duties of the Executive Director under the State Ethics Commission Act is to yearly present the Commission's budget to the Commission for approval. And the way that we do that is we do it in the fall, presenting the budget request as opposed to presenting the operating budget after the General Appropriations Act has passed. And so as part of your meeting materials is the FY23 budget request, which includes the FY23 strategic plan. These are documents that Wendy and I had to deliver to DFA and LFC by September the 1st. And so, as many of you know, we presented to the LFC a subcommittee a couple of weeks ago, and to the leadership at DFA this past week, presented this budget request. The FY23 budget request is what we're asking for is a relatively significant increase from FY22. So in FY22, the commission received about 910,000. And in FY23, the commission is requesting $1,277,400. The FY22 budget, you'll remember, was a 5% decrease from FY21. So we took a 5% budget cut in FY22. That's enough to keep 5 FTE on staff through FY22. Right now, we have 6 FTE. The Special Projects Coordinator 2 position, Mike Kiley, as you'll remember, is now under an MOU and a budget adjustment on full time with the Citizen Redistricting Committee. So the Citizen Redistricting Committee is reimbursing the Ethics Commission for Mike's salary through the end of October. And at the end of October, when that budget adjustment is expended, the commission will lose funding for 6 FTE. We'll only have funding for 5 FTE through the remainder of FY22. The FY23 request would be enough to fund 9 FTE positions. So this is a request that would move the commission into a much stronger position to fulfill its mandates under the Constitution and the State Ethics Commission Act. The 1.27 million request, again, would fund 9 FTE. So that would be the 5 FTE that you see on the call today. It would restore funding for the Special Projects Coordinator 2 position. And we'd be asking for funding to fill 3 additional positions. An attorney 4 position, a paralegal A position, and a database administrator 1 position, all of which would be classified positions. The FY23 budget request also requests an increase in the 400s, the other operating expenses category, for costs that are commensurate with bringing on new FTE. So that would be all of the do-it charges that are associated, the lease space that would be needed, the furniture that would be needed, the IT that would be needed. So the bulk of the increase is for salary and benefits in the 200s. There's some increase that's requested in commensurate other operating costs, and the FY23 request is flat with respect to the contracts category, the 300s category. And so that's a review of the FY23 request. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that.
All right, let's go ahead and do what we traditionally do and start alphabetically. Commissioner Baker?
Yes.
No. Do you have any questions?
No, sir.
Okay, it's a good answer. All right, Commissioner Bluestone?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Jeremy. I think it is a very sound and prudent proposal. My only question is whether we will need any additional office space if we get these 3 positions and the one that's temporary reinstated, if that's factored into the budget, or if you have the space where you are right now to handle the additional increases.
Thank you. So Chair and Commissioner Bluestone, it is factored into the request for additional office space. We've received some quotes from the property manage office here at UNM Science and Technology Park, and we'd be looking for additional office space here at the park. This part of the request is the piece that I suppose after initial discussions with the LFC staff that I'm least sanguine about. I think that there's an effort on the part of the LFC to try to concentrate the state into a smaller office footprint across all agencies. But currently the space that we have would not be large enough for 9 FTE. And if we didn't get commensurate an increase in the 400s, then we would just have to work out a telework arrangement, an office sharing arrangement to make it work.
Okay, thank you for that explanation.
Thank you. Commissioner Carruthers?
Yeah, I would only comment that I talked to David Abbey after Jeremy asked me to. I went over the budget particulars with him. He was very supportive, said Jeremy did an outstanding job of making the case. He was reluctant, but did not say he would not approve the space requirement, and did discuss the fact that more and more people are working from home and that we ought to look at that alternative. So David is, for these smaller budgets, what David recommends is very influential with the legislature. He led me to believe that he was okay with the personnel request, but he had problems with the space request. So if we're going to do this properly, we probably ought to go with David's recommendation, if it is as I think it is, and try to solve these space issues some other way.
Thank you. Commissioner Castillo?
Mr. Chairman, I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Solomon?
No questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Villanueva?
No questions other than what Commissioner Bluestone asked was my question. Good question.
Great minds think alike.
So
Great
Chair,
moment.
before you go to a motion, I'd like to just present the strategic plan because that's technically part of the budget request.
Yes, as you wish.
Great. So commissioners, also in your materials is the FY23 strategic plan. As I just mentioned, this forms part of an agency's yearly budget request. The strategic plan, it highlights a lot of the accomplishments of the commission in its first couple of years. I won't go through those. The main kind of objective of the FY23 strategic plan is really to bring on more staff. I mean, every time that I have a discussion about the commission strategy at the moment, it's entirely geared to the need to increase the commission staff. I mean, we have a fantastic staff at the moment, super talented set of individuals, but this agency simply cannot run with 5 FTE. And if 5 FTE aren't sufficient to meet the kind of current mandates that the Constitution and the State Ethics Commission Act imposed on the commission in its first couple of years. As you know, the legislature has already added additional statutes to the commission's docket. It's task list. So in January, the commission will also be responsible for adjudicating alleged violations of misconduct by notaries public. That was a function that was housed within the Regulation and Licensing Department, but has been moved over to the Ethics Commission starting in January. And so there's that aspect. We're learning more about how the State Ethics Commission Act works, in particular, the provision that allows for respondents to be provided by risk management contract counsel. And we now have a much better understanding of what that provision means in terms of our litigation related to the subpoenas that the commission issues and the kind of work that it imposes on the commission staff. And so we've just learned a lot more about how the State Ethics Commission Act works. The commission is being tasked with further responsibilities, and the legislature is discussing further responsibilities for the commission for the future. And kind of in view of all of that, I mean, the strategy at the moment for FY23 and going forward is we have to bring on more people. We absolutely have to have a larger staff to run this agency. It won't work with 5, and it's you know, I really commend the staff for all of the work that they do to kind of get us to where we are with just 5. And so that's the main overarching message of the FY23 strategic plan. I mean, across the different the different tranches of functions that the commission has, the adjudication of administrative complaints, the enforcement of the statutes and civil actions, the guidance and training functions that the commission offers through its advisory opinions and its training. The strategic plans include kind of bullets in each of those areas. But again, as you'll see in each of those areas, the main thrust is the need for additional staff to carry that work. And so with that, Chair, I'd like to open it up for any questions that the commissioners might have.
All right, anybody have anything on the strategic plan that we have not yet addressed? Jeff?
No, sir.
Stuart?
I have a few relatively minor questions. Starting on page 34 of our materials, page 32 of the report, there's a proposal to consider a rule change that will allow the commissioner who is not a member of either the largest or second largest political party, namely Jeff, to serve as a hearing officer, where the contracted hearing officers must recuse on conflicts of interest grounds. I'd just like a little bit of an explanation on the reason for that. I mean, I assume that we would first try to get an independent hearing officer who we do contract with, but I can imagine there might be conflicts that would make that more difficult. And I wonder if Jeremy could just explain the reason for that particular proposal.
So Chair and Commissioner Bluestone, thanks for that question. You'll remember that this option of allowing a commissioner, and in this case, the non-major first or second largest party in the state commissioner to serve as a hearing officer is something the commission debated in its very beginning, when the commission was working on its very first set of rules in December of 2019. The reason for the suggestion at the moment is, in the past year and in the last legislative session, the commission received administrative complaints alleging violations by very high-profile members of state government. And in those instances, and in one instance in particular, both of the contract hearing officer, Judge Torgerson, that we have on contract, and the administrative hearings office, both refused to hear the case. Both cited different kinds of conflicts of interest that prevented their hearing that matter. And luckily, we were able to find a retired federal bankruptcy judge, the former chief bankruptcy judge, James Starzinski, who was sufficiently removed from the operation of state government throughout his career and really throughout his political participation, that he didn't have a disqualifying conflict of interest and was willing to serve as a hearing officer. But it took us quite a while to find a hearing officer that was willing to sit in those matters. And Judge Starzinski and some of the retired federal judges will be in the same position going forward. He won't take a compensation for his work as an administrative hearings officer, and he has done substantial work so far on a couple of matters for the commission. Compensation would affect his federal annuity, and that'll be the case for other retired federal judges. And so what this proposed rule change does is it would just allow the commission another option if in those very high profile cases we're having real difficulty in finding a non-conflicted hearing officer. The rule change would have to come with the condition that if a commissioner served as a hearing officer at the hearing level, then they would not be part of the appellate level where the full commission sits as an appellate body over administrative hearings. But that's the origin and the cause for proposing this request, and it would have to be done through a rulemaking, which means the commission would have ample opportunity to discuss it in the future.
Well, thanks for that explanation. So the entire administrative hearing office recused. I mean, not just individual offices, but the entire office recused on that matter.
Chair and Commissioner Bluestone, that's correct.
Okay. Well, it makes sense then to consider this. I'm just surprised that the entire office would recuse. Also on that page 34 of our materials, 32 of the report, the next item is to provide public guidance on what's called the blackout period. And I remember that we had some complaints about that in the last election cycle. And there was reference in a letter, I remember, to amending that blackout period in the legislation, but I don't recall anything was ever introduced. And I just wonder if you could give us more background about that and what the guidance is you're intending to provide.
Sure. So I appreciate that. The this bullet in the strategic plan is really just really a plan to try to educate candidates and incumbents about what the blackout period how it actually functions in statute. We had a number of questions about this in the past election cycle with respect to what Section 15B prohibited or permitted the Ethics Commission to do during the period before election days. And the idea here is just for the commission and its staff to get ahead of that, be less reactive, include it in our trainings materials, maybe include a press release about it, but just to get ahead of it and try to alleviate some of the confusion that particular provision causes. There in the past session, Commissioner Bluestone, you're right, there wasn't any bill that was introduced to amend that statutory provision.
Okay, thank you for that too. And then my final question is on the next page. You refer in the strategic report to working with the Secretary of State to help implement a Financial Disclosure Act compliance project. And I just wonder if you could explain what that involves, please.
I'm happy to. So we're currently working with the Secretary of State's office to develop a comprehensive database of every person in state government who is required by the Financial Disclosure Act to file an annual financial disclosure. You'll remember that the commission has already made some advances in this regard in the advisory opinion that the commission recently issued, providing guidance on who a state agency head is. Now comes the work of applying that advisory opinion across the New Mexico statutes annotated to develop a list of which individuals and which agencies are the heads, which members of certain boards and commissions are Senate confirmed and thus have to file a financial disclosure. So the developing of a complete database of who's required to file an annual financial disclosure is something that we're working on. And then the Secretary of State's office is the agency that's the repository for all the filings. So once we have our kind of complete list built out, which Paul Biederman is on contract and is working on at the moment, then we can compare that list with the Secretary of State's list of who has actually filed, and then go forward with the Secretary of State's office sending initial letters requesting voluntary compliance, and then then the Ethics Commission taking further action to ensure that everyone that is required to file an annual financial disclosure is in fact doing so.
Well, I guess that kind of begs the question that we should probably talk about in the context of possible legislation that I know we'll get to later. But I would assume that there should be some consideration of working with the Secretary of State's office on whether, and if so, how to propose amendments to the Financial Disclosure Act. Like we've mentioned before, on giving them rulemaking authority and maybe other substantive changes.
Chair and Commissioner Bluestone, that's also something that we're working on, but no matter what amendments we're able to achieve or not, we have to have a kind of operational plan for better compliance for the statute that currently exists now. And that's what this bullet is about, and the Biederman contract and our present work.
Understood. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you. Governor?
No comment.
Thank you. Commissioner Castillo? Celia?
There we go.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to say I thought the plan was very well done. My only question was the same one that Stuart had with regard to commissioners being hearing officers, and I have my answer to that one. And I like the focus on more staff, because definitely the commission needs more staff. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Solomon?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Villarreal?
One-
Why do I? Villanueva.
That's good. I have one question. Director, if we are unsuccessful at gaining any FTEs, what is your plan for prioritizing the responsibilities of the commission?
So, Chair and Commissioner Villanueva, that's I guess an easy question to answer. There are certain statutory duties that the commission has to fulfill, and then there is a set of discretionary actions that the commission can take to better enforce and vindicate the statutes that the commission is responsible for. If the commission doesn't receive more in the way of FTE, the first and most important function, I think, of the commission is the adjudication of these administrative complaints. That will kind of remain the priority, followed by the issuance of advisory opinions from persons that are authorized to request advisory opinions. I think that without additional staff, the commissions will have to keep its focus kind of exclusively on those functions. And that means that a lot of other pieces would be neglected. The commission's discretionary authority to bring civil enforcement actions in state court to enforce the statutes that the commission is tasked to enforce. There would be a real limit to the trainings that the commission staff could offer across the state to agencies, to municipalities, to counties. to boards of regents. So the prioritization would fall heavily on kind of where we are now, adjudicating administrative complaints, timely issuing advisory opinions, with a kind of limited ability to provide trainings, a limited ability to take on civil enforcement actions. We'd have to remain extremely selective about what kinds of enforcement actions the commission would pursue with such a limited attorney staff.
Thank you.
All right, so is there a motion and is there a second to adopt the budget request and strategic plan as provided and discussed?
So moved.
Moved.
It's been
Second.
moved and seconded. There no further discussion. Commissioner Baker,
Yes.
Commissioner Bluestone,
Yes.
excuse me, Commissioner Carruthers,
Yes.
Commissioner Castillo,
Yes,
Mr. Solomon,
Yes.
Commissioner Villanueva.
Yes.
Thank you. Chair votes yes. The motion carries. Okay, Jeremy, you're still up. Adoption of amendments to 1.8.1.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This is carried over from last meeting, where there was discussion on how best to approach an amendment to 1.8.1.9 of the New Mexico Administrative Code, which is the section that deals with commission advisory opinions. It was tabled at the last meeting, and since the last meeting, Commissioners Bluestone, Commissioner Castillo, Commissioner Villanueva all submitted ideas about how best to amend this provision of the administrative code. And we took those into consideration and have drafted a proposal that you have here in your materials. I suppose it's paginated, page number 50. If you're looking at a PDF viewer, it'd be page number 52. And what this amendment does, I think it's a kind of clean and relatively clear way for the requesters to request advisory opinions of the commission, and for the requester to decide whether or not they most prefer an informal advisory opinion or an opinion, what we've called in the past a formal advisory opinion, an advisory opinion that has some type of defensive power in administrative proceedings. So I think it kind of cleanly allows the requester to decide what kind of opinion is most beneficial for them. As you know, the commission can only issue formal opinions every time it meets. And so there's an advantage for the requester to be able to request an informal opinion, a letter opinion that the staff could turn around relatively quickly. And then I want to remind the commissioners again that another one of the amendments to this provision allows any commissioner to draft an advisory opinion based on a legal determination that is made in the course of an administrative proceeding, so long as the advisory opinion that is issued doesn't make reference to anything that would be confidential, the names of any of the parties in the administrative proceeding. And the reason for that is, as you know, we have done a lot of work. There have been opinions that the director has issued, that the general counsel has issued, that I think do a pretty good job of clarifying different aspects of New Mexico law, of the Governmental Conduct Act, of the privileges, or I'm sorry, of a legislator's privilege with respect to speech in committee or on the floor. So there's just a lot of really great work that in a court would be able to publish and would kind of serve a precedential clarificatory role. We're doing that work, but it's not serving that role because nobody can see it, because all of these administrative proceedings remain confidential. So an amendment in this, in what you have before you allows a commissioner to request an advisory opinion based on work the commission has done in the course of its administrative proceedings in order to kind of help with the commission's law guiding clarificatory role. And so with that, Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Jeff?
No questions.
Stuart?
I just want to comment that I think they did an excellent job of merging together the discussions we had, and I appreciate the input that Commissioner Villanueva and Castillo gave as well, and I like it, so I'm pleased with it. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you. Governor?
No comment.
Commissioner Castillo?
I like it. Good job, Jeremy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Solomon?
I appreciate the input of our fellow commissioners, and it turned out well. Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Villanueva?
I like it. Good.
Thank you. I do as well. And I really sincerely appreciate the work, not just in this particular instance, but throughout our existence that particularly Judy and Stuart, and now you, Celia, have brought to the fixing it in a subcommittee, if you will. That helps all of us and further underscores the trust, I think, that the commissioners have for one another, and that's no less bold today than it has been. So thank you very much. I sincerely appreciate that. All right, so motion in a second.
So move.
Thank you. Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion to adopt the amendments to 1.8.1 NMAC. Commissioner Baker,
Yes.
Commissioner Bluestone,
Yes,
Commissioner Carruthers,
Yes,
Commissioner Castillo,
Yes.
Commissioner Solomon,
Yes.
and Commissioner Villanueva.
Yes.
Thank you. Chair votes yes as well. The motion carries. The October 1st report on jurisdiction, today being October 1st, seems like a good time to consider that.
Thank you,
Jeremy?
Chair. So commissioners, this is an item that's the conclusion of a large project. And in many ways, this is the last of the kind of special assignments that the commission was given at the outset in the State Ethics Commission Act and the session law that was related to that statute. The legislature required the commission back in 2019 to provide a report by October 1st of 2021 as to the commission's jurisdiction. And the idea was, I believe, for the commission to take a look at its jurisdiction as it sits as a quasi-judicial adjudicatory agency, and to make any recommendations to the legislature about changing that jurisdiction. I think we've often thought about this project as relating principally to the question whether or not the commission's jurisdiction for its administrative cases should be expanded to include the officials and employees of local governments, of beyond state agencies, county governments, municipal governments, special districts, school districts, for example. But the project and the question of the commission's jurisdiction is much greater than that question of whether or not the commission's personal jurisdiction should be expanded to include additional categories of respondents. There were also questions that were about whether or not other substantive provisions of law, constitutional provisions, statutory provisions should be within the commission's subject matter jurisdiction. There were questions raised about whether or not the commission's personal jurisdiction should be expanded in all other ways. For example, to include not only the individuals, officials and employees of state agencies, but the entities themselves, the agency entities themselves. And that's a point that Commissioner Bluestone raised relatively early on in this project. We've been working on this for some time. You'll remember that Dr. Mike Kiley, the Special Projects Coordinator too, while he was with the commission full-time, this was pretty much the bulk of his work to work on outreach, fashioning surveys, collecting survey data from the counties and municipalities. Dr. Kiley, myself, Sonny, we all conducted interviews with the directors of other state ethics commissions and about a couple of dozen other states to understand what it looks like when a state ethics commission in another jurisdiction has jurisdiction both for state executive, legislative officials and employees, but also local officials and employees, just to get a sense of what that means for their work, what it means for their staffing requirements. And so kind of as a product of all that work, you have before you a draft of a report, a relatively final draft of a report of the, that the commission owes today to the legislature and the governor. The recommendations are as follows. So with respect to the commission's subject matter jurisdiction, there are a couple of constitutional provisions that are deeply ethical provisions of the Constitution. Those being the provisions that relate to emoluments, to extra compensation, to legislative interests in civil offices that are created during their terms, to legislative interests in contracts that are created during their terms. Those provisions, I think, are very near to the kind of foundational principle of government ethics law, that those that work for government, that their powers and prerogatives of office, the property they have access to is not theirs, it's held in trust for the people. And these provisions of the Constitution are very much akin to that foundational normative principle. And so for that reason, the recommendation is that they be included into the commission subject matter jurisdiction. They wouldn't be the first constitutional provision that's part of the commission subject matter jurisdiction. As you'll recall, the anti-donation clause is already part of the commission subject matter jurisdiction. And indeed, the commission has adjudicated anti-donation clause claims so far. So with respect to the commission's personal jurisdiction, the recommendation is that the commission's personal jurisdiction be expanded only to include the public agencies as entities, the entities themselves also being the respondents. That's particularly important with respect to kind of to procurement code claims that the commission receives. And it's also important for the commission to be able to issue kind of injunctive remedies against those that in state government that can rectify and remedy violations of the Governmental Conduct Act or the procurement code. One thing that we've noticed is that claims are filed against respondents who might leave state government, or they're filed against maybe the apex of the agency, the agency head, where the violation might have actually occurred somewhere else in the agency. And so I think the commission's ability to exercise jurisdiction for entity respondents will ultimately assist the commission in remedying violations of the ethics laws and vindicating those laws. And again, thanks to Commissioner Bluestone for pointing that piece out. Now, with respect to the kind of large question, should the commission's jurisdiction be expanded, personal jurisdiction be expanded for the officials and employees of local governments? Right now, the recommendation is that it's too soon. The commission really isn't in a position to bridge from its current staffing capacities to take on that additional work. That's kind of a step change. It's a large, it's not a kind of gradual increase. It would be a very large increase, and it would be quite complicated. And I frankly just don't believe that the commission is at a position right now with its staffing capability to make that bridge. As you know, in the State Ethics Commission Act, the commission can recommend changes to the statutes every year to the legislature. So just because the commission is not at the moment on October 1st, 2021, recommending an expansion of jurisdiction for local governments, it doesn't mean that in a few years that the commission can make that recommendation to the legislature, or couldn't rather. I think that this is a topic that the commission needs to continue to think about, and especially after the commission is a little better staffed to handle its current responsibilities. However, there are ways that the commission currently could assist compliance with the ethics laws at the municipal and county level. And there are a couple of recommendations that this report includes to that end. So the first is to allow the officials and employees of municipal governments, of county governments, of special districts, school districts, to request advisory opinions from the commission. And currently they're not able to do that. And we turn those requests away because under statute, the commission doesn't have authority to issue advisory opinions from those categories of requesters. So that is something I do believe that we could take on. We could issue advisory opinions upon request to members of county and local and municipal governments, to school districts, and I think that would help, and I think we could do it. And then second, there's another recommendation, and this is something that Commissioner Villanueva has raised, is to develop a kind of liaison relationship with the county and municipal governments. And so the recommendation here is for the legislature to require the county and municipal governments to appoint a clerk or a manager as the local government's chief ethics officer. All local governments have to have chief procurement officers. The idea here would be for local governments to have a chief ethics officer, someone who's responsible for coordinating with the Ethics Commission, for the provision of trainings, for the submission of requests for advisory opinions, and also just to alert the commission if there are any serious issues that the commission needs to look at for a potential civil action. So, Chair, that is in sum this large report on the commission's jurisdiction. I do apologize for its length. We have included as an appendix all of the responses from the municipal and county governments that submitted responses to our surveys. I'd ask the commissioners to bear with us given the size of the PDF and the size of the report, but we included that in case you were very interested in what particular county municipalities had to say. And so with that, we will be seeking a motion to submit this to Mr. Raul Burciaga and the governor today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jeremy. Commissioner Baker,
No questions?
Commissioner Bluestone.
Couple of comments. I think it's excellent. I thank you, Jeremy, and your staff for putting it together. The comments I have are, I know you will be submitting it, as you just said, to Raul as the director of the Legislative Council Service and to the governor's office. But, it's such a significant report. I also think it would be helpful if the five of us, who were appointed by either the legislative leaders or the governor, if we also asked you to draft a cover letter to come from each of the five of us to those appointing authorities so that we can be sure it gets to their attention directly. I guess in the governor's case, it might go to two senators, to both Senator Ingle, who appointed him, and to Senator Baca, who's now the minority leader in the Senate. But I think that could be a helpful way of getting the report considered. And and I don't know that we need to discuss this now, but I think we should give some consideration at some point to whom we want to approach to be sponsors or co-sponsors of the legislation to implement the recommendations here. And I think ideally, it would be great to get bipartisan sponsorship. But I also think that in addition to the legislative leaders whom I just referred to for us to send this, we've worked so closely over the years on legislation with with Representative Damon Eli, who was, I think, the lead really in the whole legislature on it. Representative Greg Nybert, who worked very closely with him in the House. Senator Peter Wirth, Senator Damon Eli. And I kind of leave it to you, Jeremy, to think about how you want to approach it. But I also think we should have some discussion among us as commissioners, or feel free to offer suggestions to you on whom to approach to be sponsors of the legislation to implement the recommendations. So those are my comments, that the five of us who are appointed by authorities send a copy of the report with a cover letter that we'll ask Jeremy to draft for us, cover email, and that we have some discussion at some point about who to approach to be sponsors of the legislation.
Thank you. Governor Carruthers?
I think it's an excellent report and recommendations. I would do a little better in highlighting some of your data that you received when you talk to the ethics commissions in other states, which really show that the preponderance of their work is for local governments and not for state governments. So somehow you might highlight that coming down the road, if in fact we mature as they have matured, then you're going to discover that there's a lot of demand at the local level for the kind of work that we do. But I was a little taken back by some of those ethics commissions that spend up to 60, 70, 80% of their business had to do with local governments. And in New Mexico, and I think you cited the number of communities that actually had ethics bodies, 5 or 6 or 7 of them. But many of these small communities, school boards and those kinds of things are never going to be able to afford to get into a strong ethics program of the kind that the larger communities can. So I still will always believe that ultimately the work of this commission will gradually gravitate to school boards and local governments.
Thank you. Excuse me, Commissioner Castillo?
Yes, I too thought that the report was very well done. I have a question. Are you submitting all those surveys with the report? They get, okay.
Chair and Commissioner Castillo, yes, we'll append that appendix to the report, and that'll be part of the package we submit.
Because I thought that the comments made by the local governmental units were in so many cases very thoughtful. And I think they show a picture of this. If we go down this row, a lot more work needs to be done to figure out how. And so I like the idea of putting this off and seeing how things go and doing more work in that area. Then for the chief ethics officer, my recollection is that the report also suggested that they do a biannual report. And we're requesting that.
Well, Chair and Commissioner Castillo, I believe so. The idea of the chief ethics officer would be for them to have a kind of reporting requirement to the Ethics Commission. The recommendation here is a biannual report, but that the main and significant recommendation is that there is some type of reporting requirement up to the State Ethics Commission. And that I will admit is an idea that came from Commissioner Villanueva.
Okay, I'm just
I think it's a good idea.
My concern is having worked with municipalities, the idea of doing another report is probably not something that's at the top of their list. Philosophically, though, it's a good idea. Why have an ethics officer unless you are staying on top of it and give this information to someone who's going to make decisions with regard to what's going to happen in the future? So that's fine. Other than that, those are all the comments I have. And like I said, job well done. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Solomon?
No questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Villanueva?
I think the report was uber excellent. I do want to join in with who made the recommendation that the report be submitted to our appointing officers. And I would like to ask that you include in the letter. I think it's particularly important to note that the scope of our commission's responsibilities is somewhat larger than those of other states, even at this point in time as a fledgling commission.
Thank you. I have no comments other than those that have been already made relative to the scope being logically expanded to include local and local governmental bodies down the road, but now is not the time. But I share in the enthusiasm for the quality, as usual, that we've become accustomed to of the report. So with that, is there a motion and a second?
I move to adopt.
Second? All
Second.
right. Commissioner Baker?
I approve. One comment, if I might. Commissioner Bluestone suggested that the report be distributed to a discrete number of legislators. I don't quite understand how the legislature works. My recommendation would be to send a copy of the report to every legislator, and then they can do with it as they see fit. But I vote to approve the motion.
Thank you. Commissioner Bluestone?
I vote to approve, and let's have some more discussion after we do the motion.
Yeah, we're strictly on the motion here. Governor Carruthers?
Yes.
Commissioner Castillo?
Yes.
Commissioner Solomon?
Yes.
Commissioner Villanueva?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Does anybody have any other suggestion relative to provision of the report beyond those entities? Obviously, my appointing authority is the governor, so that box has been checked. Legislative leaders, there doesn't seem to be an issue. Anybody have anything on greater distribution than that besides what Jeff has said?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
if you're going to distribute it to all legislators, someone's going to have to develop an abstract of this report. I will give you every assurance that
Too big. Yeah.
if you're going to send it to them, it has to be fairly concise, maybe 3 or 4 pages, and that's about it.
An executive summary. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah, Stuart.
So, I think that the legislature has some rule or practice where when they ask for reports to be submitted, as our statute does to the legislature, that it is considered done when you send it to the director of the Legislative Counsel Service. And there's some understanding I have that legislators are loath to get inundated with too many reports, particularly of the length of this one. So I think that I like the governor's suggestion of an executive shorter summary, but I think that we ought to just authorize Jeremy to work with Raul at the Legislative Counsel Service to decide on how to distribute it to all legislators, and whether we could then prepare an executive short summary like the governor suggests that would go along. I still think, even though the governor will get a copy of the report from Jeremy as the executive director on behalf of the commission, I frankly think it would still be a good idea for a separate email with the report to go from you,
That's fine.
Bill, as the chairman of the commission
Fine.
appointed
Yeah, I
by
have
the
no
governor.
objection to that.
And, you know, and I'll do it to the speaker, and Celia would do it to Senator Stewart as the pro tem, and Judy would do it to Representative Townsend as the minority leader. And I think the governor, if you're okay with it, for you to do it to both Senator Engel and Senator Baca, who's now the minority leader. I just think those would be good additional distributions. And I think that we entrust Jeremy to decide how else to talk to other legislative leaders about it and whether to enlist any of us to help on that. But we do have, as I mentioned before, a number of legislators who have been very active in ethics commission legislation. And we should have a discussion. It doesn't have to be today. But I do think as we discuss legislation later, we ought to be prepared to discuss who to approach to be the sponsors and or co-sponsors of the recommendations here that are included in the report.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, the motion carried, and Jeremy, you have some thoughts that you can rely on to proceed to distribute them. Anything else on that, or can we move on to number 4?
I guess one additional thought is just thinking about it before letting it go. I also think it would be appropriate for Jeremy to send copies of it to the chair of the House Appropriations Committee, Patty Lundstrom, the chair of the Senate Finance Committee, George Munoz, and as Governor Carruthers has indicated before, to David Abbey as the executive director of the LFC.
Okay. All right, thank you. We'll now move on to number 4. Jeremy?
Okay, Chair and Commissioners, this is an item in the way of cleanup on page 260 of the materials, 262 if you're looking at a PDF viewer. There's a resolution. It's resolution 2020-03. The material is incorrect insofar as it says 2021. This was a resolution that the commission adopted relatively early on in February of 2020, whereby the commission resolved that each commissioner would file a financial disclosure act while they sit on the State Ethics Commission. This is no longer necessary. As you know, with the passage of HB 244 and the amendment of the Financial Disclosure Act, it's now the law under the Financial Disclosure Act that commissioners be required to file annual financial disclosures. And so this resolution no longer being necessary, I'm seeking a motion that you rescind it and we kind of keep our resolutions clean.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions on this or comments? All right, is there a motion and a second?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. They're having a period for discussion having passed without incident. Commissioner Baker,
Yes.
Commissioner Bluestone,
Yes,
Commissioner Carruthers,
Yes,
Commissioner Castillo,
Yes,
Commissioner Solomon,
Yes.
Commissioner Villanueva.
Yes,
Thank you. Motion carries. Item 5, which is the appointment of, having to do with the appointment of temporary commissioners under 1.8.2.10. Commissioner Baker and Jeremy.
So Chair, I'd like to turn this over to Commissioner Baker, but before putting him on the spot, I'll just kind of remind Commissioner Baker of the issue and the commission. So there are instances where an administrative complaint is filed against a respondent who might have a close connection with multiple of the commissioners. And in that instance, when more than one commissioner recuses, the commission could be in a position where there is not a quorum to act on that administrative complaint, should it go all the way through the administrative adjudicatory process. So what I'm saying is if 2 Republican appointed commissioners had to recuse or 2 Democratically appointed commissioners had to recuse, the commission would be without a quorum to make a final adjudication on appeal from a hearing officer order. And that's something that Commissioner Baker noticed in the past month, and we were putting it on as a discussion item for today to begin to think about a rule change, a rule amendment to deal with that situation. The provision of the administrative code that's applicable here is 1.8.2.10 of the NMAC. And we don't quite have a rule that sufficiently provides for what happens when two commissioners have recused and the commission would be without a quorum to ultimately decide an administrative complaint. And so, Commissioner Baker, if there are other thoughts you had related to that question, I'll turn it over to you.
My concern was about timing. If 2 Democrats or 2 Republicans recuse on a particular issue, then my understanding is the commission will be without a quorum. If somebody who does not like a decision wants to appeal to the commission, we would have to appoint 2 temporary commissioners, either 2 Dems or 2 Republicans. And my question was, what do we do if we do it? And one way is on a case-by-case basis. The other would be to have what I refer to as a bullpen of potential temporary commissioners. And I was just trying to think through the logistics. We put out a request for proposals for interested persons. Do we call friends and family we think might be interested? How do we do it in a way that the public has confidence that the process is clean? How do we also do it in a way which is quick and simple? And so I just throw it on the table for people to think about. And so when we eventually run into that situation, we're not trying to figure it out at that time. We've already thought about it ahead of time, and we have a process.
Anyone else have any thoughts on that? Any other commissioners? Stuart?
Yes, I was just checking the statute because I thought there was something in there about it. And it's in 10-16G-7, subsection G. And it says, and first I want to commend Jeff for raising this, but it says in there, if 2 or more commissioners have recused themselves or are disqualified from participating in a proceeding, and it doesn't say that it has to be 2 from one of the major parties. It just says if any 2 commissioners have recused themselves, the remaining commissioners shall appoint temporary commissioners to participate in that proceeding. Appointments of temporary commissioners shall be made by a majority vote of the remaining commissioners in accordance with the political affiliation and geographical representation requirements and the qualifications set forth in the State Ethics Commission Act. I assume what that means is that if a Democrat and a Republican have recused, that we have to appoint a Democrat and a Republican to replace them, but I'm not sure about that. But then the next subsection says that the commission shall promulgate rules not only for recusal and disqualification, but for the appointment of temporary commissioners. So I think Jeff is absolutely spot on in terms of getting us to focus on this, whether we come up with a type of bullpen as is suggested or otherwise, I don't know. I think it depends on where the vacancies are among the commissioners who have recused. But we are going to have to do it in any proceeding where we have 2 or more commissioners who have disqualified. And I'm not sure, but I think we may have one proceeding already where we've had 2 commissioners recused. So we do have a statutory framework. I'm just suggesting that we should work around as we make proposals for implementing the rule that Commissioner Baker's recommending.
Thank you.
If I might, Jeremy, remind me, do we need 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats in order to have a quorum?
Yes, and not only that, you need that requirement in order to take any action.
Right.
It's a quorum and consent requirement.
So in a situation where 2 Democrats have recused, regardless, we'll still have 5 members of the commission, but we will not have a quorum. Is that right?
That's right. So Chair, the intention here is not to figure this out today, but and it will have to be done through a rulemaking. And it's just to alert commissioners to begin to think about it. The staff will begin to think about it. We'll have to work on a draft rule. It would have to be part of a rulemaking.
Yeah, and I assume we're all on the same page that we are having deemed this tasked to the to staff to begin to look at putting together a possible rule change with the assistance of the usual suspects, if you will, as a subcommittee. Feel free to reach out to whichever commissioners you think might be best and most helpful. And maybe not at the December meeting, but perhaps at the February one, we might be ready to look at something. Anybody else? Okay, thank you both for bringing that up. And maybe we can figure out a way around the Kafkaesque provision of you've got 5, but you don't have a quorum. In any other reality, you would, but not that one. So, all right. So prior to taking a short break, Chair will entertain a motion to go into executive session as set forth on the agenda, on the published agenda. Is there a motion in a second?
So moved.
Second.
Excuse me, Commissioner Baker,
Yes.
Commissioner Bluestone,
Yes.
Commissioner Carruthers,
Yes.
Commissioner Castillo,
Yes.
Commissioner Solomon,
Yes.
Commissioner Villanueva.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Let's take a few minutes for us and for
All right, we are back in open session, and I believe everyone can unmute themselves if they need to. I'll change that rule if we get Zoom bombed, which I hope we don't.
all right. Thank you. We're back now in open session, and Jeremy, item number 8 is the actions on administrative complaints. You want to take it?
Sure. So commissioners, on administrative complaint number 2020-31, the staff requests a 90-day extension under the State Ethics Commission Act to continue investigation of that administrative complaint.
Motion in a second.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? And hearing none, Commissioner Baker,
Yes.
Commissioner Bluestone. Stuart,
Yes.
thank you. Commissioner Carruthers,
Yes.
Commissioner Castillo,
Yes.
Commissioner Solomon,
Yes.
Commissioner Villanueva.
Yes.
Chair votes yes, motion carries. Item 8B.
So Chair and Commissioners, on this item, the staff would seek a motion to dismiss without prejudice administrative complaints number 2020-34 and 2020-35 under section 1016G 11 of the State Ethics Commission Act.
Thank you. Motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? If not, Commissioner Baker,
Yes.
Commissioner Bluestone,
Yes,
Commissioner Carruthers,
Yes,
Mr. Castillo,
Yes,
Commissioner Solomon,
Yes.
Commissioner Villanueva,
Yes,
and chair votes yes. Thank you. C.
Okay. Chair, I think we might be able to do C through F together.
I was just about to say, if you're comfortable moving with the next four, since they're identical.
So the staff would take a motion to dismiss administrative complaint numbers 2021-18, 19, 21, and 22 for lack of jurisdiction.
All right. Is there a motion and a second?
so moved.
I'll move.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Commissioner Baker.
I vote yes on 18, 21, and 22. I need to recuse on 19.
Thank you, Commissioner Baker. Commissioner Bluestone.
I vote yes on all four.
Thank you. Commissioner Carruthers.
Yes,
Okay. Commissioner Castillo.
yes on all four.
Thank you. Commissioner Solomon
Yes on all four.
and Commissioner Villanueva,
Yes,
and chair votes yes on all four as well. Thank you. Next item is number 9, which is resolution on number 2021-02, authorizing the instigation of a civil action. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? If not, Commissioner Baker,
Yes.
Commissioner Bluestone,
Yes,
Commissioner Carruthers,
yes,
Commissioner Castillo,
Yes,
Commissioner Solomon,
Yes.
Commissioner Villanueva,
yes,
chair votes yes. Okay, thank you. Next, Stuart, this is assigned to you for leading the discussion. Does not require commission action. It is to discuss, amendments to the Governmental Conduct Act.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I have been interested in our proposals to improve our governmental ethics laws. And I think it would be appropriate for us to direct the executive director and the staff to work with the Attorney General's office, the Secretary of State's office, other advocate interest groups, and review work with other state commissions on possible amendments to the Governmental Conduct Act and other ethics laws for consideration even as soon as the session in 2022.
Anybody have any thoughts on that they'd like to share? No? My, you're a docile group today. Either that or everybody's muted. No? Okay. What does the staff think about that, since it's y'all's gonna have to do the work?
Well, we're happy to do that, and so the commission knows the Attorney General's office has reached out and asked for the commission's views on work on amendments to the Governmental Conduct Act in the upcoming session. And the plan is to have the commission kind of approve that, and we will be working with the Attorney General's office going forward today, going into the next session on those amendments.
Okay. Anyone else? It sounds like that's kind of happening anyway, Stuart, which I suppose is no surprise. All right. Well, the word discussion is sometimes a bigger word than is necessary for an agenda, which leads us to the next small item, which is discussion of next meeting. By my calculations, that would be December 3rd, and until things change in the COVID world, we would do it in the same fashion that this one is. Anybody have any burning desire to change it from the 3rd to a different date? All right, December 3rd it is. Public comment. I'm going to let you run that, Walker.
Thank you, Chair. All right. Any folks here who would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand. I see that we have one person whose hand is raised, please, Kathy Sabo. So I'm going to ask you to unmute. And then, let's see here.
Walker, if I'm unmuted, I'm having problems with my camera right now.
Yeah, that's fine. We can hear you.
Okay, excellent. Good morning, everyone. Kathleen Sabo here with the New Mexico Ethics Watch. And on the last point that Commissioner Bluestone raised about getting a group together to talk about ethics reform, we had a number of people reach out to us, state offices, legislators, after a recent op-ed we wrote following the William Stapleton allegations of corruption. And we are working on putting together a working group that would be open to the public for public participation. We've spoken with Jeremy about it a bit. The state auditor's office reached out. We're waiting to hear from the Secretary of State's office, from the Attorney General's office. We've got a number of legislators from both chambers, both Democratic and Republican, and a few advocacy groups to move forward with just that, with some public meetings where everyone would have a chance to work together on talking about smart reforms that would actually have a chance of passing, whether in this short session or shortly thereafter. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. I do not see any other folks with their hands raised, and I suppose if anyone wants to jump in for a public comment, they can also unmute themselves with the risk of being quickly muted and removed if you Zoom bomb us. So, but I think we can do that because there's a very limited number of public participants left. But I won't go one by one and ask, because I see that there's some members of the news media here and other folks who've appeared at earlier meetings and expressed no interest in making public comment. So not seeing any other hands, Chair.
All right. Okay. I will draw out the adjournment part of it just in case somebody needs to get to their button, but your tough talk probably scared them off any miscreants. So if there is nothing further before the commission today, thank you all for your thoughtful attention in getting through the docket, and we will stand adjourned. See you all in a couple of months.
Goodbye, everyone.
Stay well,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
Y'all
everyone.
stay safe.
You too. Happy baseball.